Symposium with Ash Aulak.
Hi guys, welcome back to Waxing Lyrical, the music series from the Symposium. Happy to be joined by the usual crowd of Jay, Arjun and Cameron. We're going to be, as usual, talking about the albums that we're reviewing. Each of us have chosen one, and then we'll just talk about what we're going to do in the future, maybe for the rest of the week musically. But yeah, as usual, the focus will be mostly on our albums. I chose Are You Experienced by Jimi Hendrix Experience. Jay, what did you choose?
I chose Homogenic by Bjork.
Arjun, what did you choose?
I chose Illadelph Halflife by The Roots.
And Cameron, what did you choose?
My choice was Cool for Cats by Squeeze.
Okay, so as usual, we've got quite a nice eclectic mix. I'd just like to say before we start then, or we start the album review, I mean, so normally we talk about stuff we've done musically in the last week or so, what we've been listening to. Well, this morning, I went to a record store, which was a proper vintage record store with a massive eclectic genre choice, which is about 10 minutes from my house. And I went there and I got myself a few records for like 20 quid. I got like 7 records. Most of them are classical, but in the shop they have like a massive variety. And yeah, I mean, I just thought I'd just say that because I know one of Jay's birthday presents was a record player last year, and I know he really enjoys it. And my dad kind of has found his old record player from the 1980s, and it still works really well. It's like quite good condition and quality. So he's going to give me that. And yeah, I just got a few symphonies and stuff to play on it, and I thought it was quite cool. I mean, Cameron, are you a fan of actual vinyl records?
I am, yeah, I do have a record player, and I got it a few years back. And one of my favourite pastimes is to go around charity shops. I live in a town with quite an elderly population, so yeah. I'm either fortunate or unfortunate enough that there are quite a lot of charity shops locally. So yeah, going around crate digging is always quite a good experience. Probably my best pull that I've ever got doing so was an original 1964 pressing of Francois Hardie's record Tous les garçons et les filles.
Nice.
Yeah, I managed to get that for £2, so
That's very good.
I was chuffed with that one.
Yeah, I mean, the nicest one I got was it's a secondary pressing from 1937, so not an original, of Shostakovich's Fifth Symphony, and it's got like this nice Soviet artwork on the front and stuff.
No, wow, I'm in love.
So it's a 1962 original of a 1937 recording. So yeah, I just thought that was quite cool. Red label as well, and I got this one for £4. So I just thought, that's decent.
Yeah,
and
I would love to get into vinyls.
Yeah,
but
I mean,
I haven't got a vinyl player, I haven't got a record player, but ideally in my ideal life I would.
I mean, I saw the one that Jay and the one we got for Jay, our friend Jay and a couple of our other mutual friends got Jay this player, and it was like I think 30 quid or something. And there are cheaper ones that are like 20 quid. So it's not too hard to get just a turntable with a standard needle. And then the records, obviously, as Cameron said, are like quite cheap. I mean, Jay, are you enjoying using yours?
Yeah, I am. I've been meaning to get some more. I've been meaning to kind of go to some shops. I think that's something I'm going to do in the coming weeks, actually, and get some more albums on mine. I've listened to Kids See Ghosts on it. I couldn't even tell you how many times.
Yeah, because Rohan, our friend, bought me Dark Side of the Moon in vinyl. Yeah. Which I guess puts me in the same group as about 100 million other people in the world who also have that on vinyl. But that kind of then made me decide to maybe expand. And I got like a few classical pieces. So I got Shostakovich's Fifth. I got American in Paris and Rhapsody in Blue by George Gershwin. I got Tchaikovsky's Number 6 Symphony. And a few overtures from Wagner, among some others. So I got a lot of classical stuff. But I want to branch out into more 60s, 70s stuff then, I guess, But yeah, that's a nice intro. What have you guys been listening to more recently then? Jay, what have you been listening to this week?
Gosh, what have I been listening to? I've listened to a lot of Radiohead this week. I think I've listened to so much Radiohead that they're probably number one on my Spotify from this year.
Okay.
Literally just out of the last week alone.
Which ones? What, Kid A or?
No, so I finally got around to listening to Moonshaped Pool this week,
Right.
which is their most recent album,
And
is the funny thing. It's similar vibe to a lot of their stuff, but it's a lot more depressing and it's kind of a lot more kind of ambient than their other works. It's a really good album. It's very obviously Johnny Greenwood has for the past kind of decade or so been playing around with scores for films, and I think it shows off here more than ever. There's a lot of orchestral work going on here. He's obviously just completely taking control. It's a really good album.
Doesn't he do some of Paul Thomas Anderson's films?
Yeah, he's done. I think he's done all four since There'll Be Blood. He's done There'll Be Blood, The Master, Inherent Vice, and Phantom Thread.
Well, all of them are. Well, I haven't seen Phantom Thread, but the other three I can say for sure are brilliant films. So
yeah,
that's good. Cameron, how about you?
So I've been revisiting probably what a lot of people would call a guilty pleasure, even though I despise the term, and that is the Carpenters.
Oh,
so,
classic.
It is a classic. Yeah, I've been in a very sad mood, obviously. But it's actually been inspired by a book that I'm reading at the minute, which is called Why Karen Carpenter Matters by Karen Tongson. And Karen Tongson she emigrated to America with her family in the 1970s, and her mother then named her for Karen Carpenter. And it's a brilliant exploration of how cultural identity and music are linked, because Karen Carpenter, she writes, sort of embodied this clean-cut American dream image of the 1970s, and that's obviously why she was then named for her. So go and check that out if you can. It's a really great book, and obviously listen to the Carpenters as well, because she's probably the greatest singer of all time, in my opinion.
That's a bold claim. Arjun.
So a few days ago, one of my favourite young and up-and-coming rappers, Joey Badass, released a new EP, a 3-song EP, and one of the songs that was on the EP sampled a classic hip-hop track from the mid-1990s by an underground hip-hop group called Jedi Mind Tricks. And so I've been listening back to their first couple of albums. They're very underground. I mean, their first album is called The Psychosocial, Chemical, Biological and Electromagnetic Manipulation of Human Consciousness, which is quite a wordy album, and it sort of tells you that they're a bit intellectual and a bit perhaps pretentious, but they're a really good group, and I've been re-listening to them, and I maybe might recommend one or two of the albums to you guys in the future.
That sounds right up Jay's
I think the
street,
name
I'll say
sold
that.
out.
Yeah,
The name sold out.
I'll just come in and say that Uncommon Valor by Jedi Mind Tricks is probably my favourite hip-hop song of the 2000s. It's such a tune.
Oh, nice. Okay.
It is so
glad that you know them then, yeah.
I don't know them personally. I mean, but yeah, I mean, I've been listening to a lot of MF Doom and Madlib stuff. So I re-listened to Pinata, which is Madlib and Freddie Gibbs, which Arjun introduced me to not that long ago. And it's even better on a second listen. I think it's better than their second album, Bandana. And yeah, I really enjoyed that as a listen. I mean, I've also been listening to some of Madlib's collaborations with MF Doom. So obviously Mad Villainy, which is a really good album that I introduced Jay to as well, and he really enjoyed it. And then some of MF Doom's own stuff, like Food, and also the kind of vaudeville villain stuff. So yeah, I mean, I've got getting back into that kind of stuff. Arjun, I know that you're a fan of kind of Madlib. Do you like the kind of collabs with MF Doom, and what do you think about MF Doom's own work, just from your hip hop perspective?
Yeah, I love Mad Villainy and Food. Haven't listened to them in quite a while, actually. I'll get back into that in the next couple of weeks, or a couple of days, actually. But yeah, I think they both complement each other really well. Madlib's like a legendary producer in his own right. And yeah, his collaborations with rappers such as MF Doom, Freddie Gibbs shows that he's definitely stands on his own in sort of the hip hop hall of fame. And yeah, I'm looking forward to whatever he does next. I know that him and Freddie Gibbs have got another album planned called Montana, which is like the third in the trilogy that should come out next year or something. But it'd be nice if him and MF Doom could link up again and produce something. Although MF Doom sort of seems to be in semi-retirement right now, barely comes out to record anything new, whether it's a feature or a song. So we'll see about that.
No, it's just a shame. I mean, what I really like about his stuff, I noticed, was the kind of cartoonish elements, almost like you're in an explicit adult version of a classic Saturday morning cartoon, like a classic superhero cartoon, whether it's Spider-Man, Batman, or Batfink, any of those. And I really like that kind of vibe, because it's almost like you know when you see on Instagram those rappers that'll put over cartoons, it's almost as if this was kind of made for that, which is quite interesting. I mean, Cameron, what are your thoughts on Madlib and MF Doom?
Yeah, I've got to be honest. I've only really listened to Mad Villainy, but it's a great album. I think the thing that sells it for me is the production of it and just how tight it is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a short album from it's like what 25 minutes.
No, it's about 40 actually.
It's about 40. Well,
Yeah.
there you go. That just goes to prove it. It's one of those things that it sounds a lot tighter than what you might actually.
Yeah. I mean, each track's only like 1 minute or 2 minutes.
Yeah, that's probably why I'm getting confused with it. But no, the time passes really quickly on it because it just flows so seamlessly from one track to the next. So great production.
Yeah.
I'd love to check out more of his stuff.
Yeah, no, it's good. Right, I think we should just.
Yeah,
go on.
Sign of a good album where there may be a lot of tracks and may be quite long, but it never feels stale, it never gets old. You can listen to it again and again. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's get into the albums then. So, Jay, do you want to go first with your choice? I think it was Bjork.
Yes, it was Homogenic by Bjork. So I picked this album. To be honest, I really like Bjork. I think she's probably one of the most interesting female musicians out there. She's kind of started her career. If you listen to her earlier stuff, they're kind of more, electro-poppy, and then as she's gotten older, her stuff's gotten more and more experimental. And I feel like Homogenic's kind of a nice crossroads of that. You hear kind of the experimental tracks on songs like Pluto. You hear kind of the poppy vibes on stuff like Alarm Call. But there's also like these huge orchestral tracks. I feel like it's kind of a good album that kind of gives you an overview of what she's about as an artist. She, for me, I feel like I kind of get Kate Bush kind of vibes with her. I feel like she's a similar kind of artist to Bush. She's, a female artist with a strong voice who uses that voice kind of to create this amazing sounds in her music, and has got a lot of talent in terms of songwriting, production, and make kind of really experimental, interesting works. So yeah, I think she's a great artist. I think this is a great album. So I'm curious to hear what you guys make of it.
Yeah, I mean, Cameron, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, this is an outstanding album. I think the greatest compliment I can give it is that if it were released today, it would still sound fresh. And when you think that it was
I agree completely.
You think it dropped 25 years ago almost. It's just a testament to its ambition and where it took her established sound with albums like Post and Debut. So I listened to it throughout. I think it's sort of a weird album to listen to with the benefit of hindsight, because all I heard through it, and this is again a compliment in the highest sense, were artists that she has then influenced. So I could hear traces of Angel Olsen from last year, or St. Vincent, or elements of Beach House. And that's the strength of it to me, is that that's like where a lot of these themes and a lot of these ideas originated. And, as for the album itself, songwriting wise, I think she's definitely matured from her first two albums. Like Jay said, it's a nice mediation of the electro pop themes that she explored, but also being willing to experiment, bring in these aspects like Icelandic strings and choirs, then with the sort of heavy pounding drum and bass. It's a brilliant album with a lot of identifiable influences and strands. So it's an interesting record, like Jay said. It's a very good album.
I like the kind of rhythmic varieties on it. So songs like I think it was Hunter, or also Bachelorette. All of them have kind of like boppy kind of hi-hats and kind of like kicks and snares. And you can hear that, and it's also slightly more like, it keeps it quite lively, as you say, but also it does, as Cameron says, keeps it quite fresh, in that she combines a lot of like electronic-y future sounds with some really good use of like classically melodic instruments as well, which kind of leads to a nice variety. I mean, Arjun, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I really enjoyed this album. I thought my criticism of it would be that it perhaps started off excellently and then tailed off a bit towards the end, but on the whole,
I might agree slightly. Yeah.
I thought Hunter was a really good opening track. That was my favorite song on the album.
Yeah.
And it set a really nice tone for the rest of the album. And I wouldn't be surprised if, from the little I know of her, I wouldn't be surprised if that was considered one of her best songs. I would say that the tone that song created for the rest of the album was really good. It was a very arresting piece of music. I thought the other standout songs for me were Bachelorette, which was a bit more of a conventional song in terms of its melodies on the album, but it just sounded very grandiose, and I thought it really carried it well. And then the song Pluto, which may have been a bit out of place because it was a bit more aggressive than the rest of the songs, but I really liked it. Yeah, I did enjoy this album, and yeah, I look forward to listening to more of her.
I like the kind of almost I'm not really sure suffocating is the right word, but like very intense sound and dense you get from like Hoga. Is it Hoga? Yoga. And I thought that was quite interesting, just because it contrasts nicely with other songs on the album. And that's what I kind of agree with Arjun in the sense that it, like, songs like Alarm Call. I feel like that's a bit of a contrast to Yoga, but then at the same time I feel Yoga is almost a higher quality as well. I'm not sure. I mean, although I think it's like a very good album. I agree with Arjun. I think it might tail off slightly near the end.
Yeah, I'd say probably Yoga and Unravel are probably my two favorite songs on the album.
Yeah.
I think Yoga's like an incredible song. I think she uses her vocals like absolutely perfectly. If you ever hear like a live version, it sounds exactly the same. I think, there are songs, I mean, Alarm Call has kind of grown on me over the years. All Is Full of Love, I'm not really too mad about. But I think even so, I think in time with the context of the album, you've got something like Pluto, which is like just blasting in your ear. Like, it's such an intense song. And then suddenly you just switch into All Is Full of Love, which is like very ambient, very quiet, very tame. And I feel like it kind of is a nice kind of, it always like lets off the steam that Pluto's just kind of gone for. So I think even some of the tracks I don't like as much, I can definitely understand why they're on this album.
What I kind of liked actually was the kind of, although I agree with Arjun that maybe not all the songs are of equal quality, I disagree with him on the kind of on the way that the quality went up and down throughout the album. In that, although he says it kind of tails off, I think a couple of the last songs are actually quite good, like Pluto, which feels like almost like it's very, as I say, intense but lively. It comes back from Alarm Call into the kind of almost like very synthy, and she howls a lot, and she's clearly trying to leave a lasting impression at the end of the album. I mean, Cameron.
Yeah, I think it goes to the variety of the record that my favorite song on it was actually Alarm Call. Because,
really? Okay.
Yeah, I loved Alarm Call. I loved how she used the sampling and the electronic rhythm, and she sort of interspersed that throughout. I think it was some really tight sampling there, which I could appreciate. Probably, again, because I prefer my stuff more electronic than the more rich orchestral sound of Yoga. But when discussing how it might tail off, I think that it's actually a really good bit of musicianship, because it's an album that has peaks and troughs, not in terms of quality, but in terms of intensity.
Yes,
it ends with Pluto, or Pluto's very close to the end. It's this big pounding techno track almost.
Very industrial, wouldn't you say?
Very industrial, yeah. It's almost like a bit of Trent Reznor, Nine Inch Nails. That's a bit of vibe I got off it. But then it does have the more lullaby, atmospheric song. So it does. I like the way it varies its sound.
Yeah, I mean, Pluto to me almost kind of reminds me of On Sight from Yeezus in a weird way. It's just like this big statement piece of just pure industrial sound, just kind of going for it. It's one of those. I mean, I really like this song. I think it just absolutely smacks you in the face.
No, I think it's quite clear that if you read around the album as well, like, in context of maybe her trying to rediscover her heritage or recognize it, it's quite a confrontational album. It's not an album that you can just sit and let it just let it flow over you. It demands your attention. As you say, it slaps you in the face, but it demands that you listen. It actually, even if you're doing something else, the music will actually grab your attention, which is something that's quite rare. Which is quite rare.
I think that's something that she does, even if we're not just talking about this. And like, for example, Medulla, which is an album which was the album, I think she made it 2 albums after Homogenic. So this album, for example, it's pretty much an a cappella album, and she's just trying to use it's pretty much everything in it as a human voice, but it's kind of pushing it as far as humanly possible. And I think you kind of see that in Homogenic, where she takes this idea of the Scandinavian roots and pushes that as far as possible in songs like, through kind of what she does, she deploys these it's like an Icelandic kind of singing technique. It's like half spoken,
Yeah.
half kind of like ancient wailing kind of sounds. So I like that kind of one of the things she does do throughout her career is she's always willing to experiment, and she's kind of happy to push these experiments as far as possible, which obviously maybe it doesn't always work, but I think it's always something that you can respect in her as an artist.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Arjun, would you like the final word?
Yeah, it was good. I agree with everything that you guys said. I think that when I said that it tailed off towards the end, I didn't mean the songs took a complete nosedive. I did enjoy the songs overall at the end, but I just thought compared to the incredible start of the album, with songs like The Hunter and Yoga, and also Unravel, I think, which is the third or fourth song of the album, it just felt a bit lacking in comparison. But yeah, it was overall quite a solid album, I thought.
Okay, good. I mean, I think let's move on to then my choice. So I chose "Are You Experienced" by Jimi Hendrix, or kind of Jimi Hendrix Experience. What is there that you can say about this record that's not been said? It's seen as one of the best records ever made, according to Rolling Stone. It's rated 10 out of 10 by, I don't think I had anyone ever give any kind of, I don't think I've ever seen a review that gives it less than 4 or 5 stars. The songs on it are incredibly famous and ubiquitous with the era and the artist, whether it's Purple Haze or Hey Joe, or kind of other songs that are not as well known, or even Foxy Lady, or other songs that are not as well known, which have amazing outros. The album is packed full of beautiful guitar work and riffs, almost some bluesy notes versus some rock notes with beautiful variety. The vocals are, as usual, on point. The remastering I found on Spotify, which is where I listened to it, was really good. It made the most of modern stereo sound. I think the other members of the band were brilliant, especially the percussion, as Jay said to me actually a couple of days ago. And yeah, overall, I mean, there's not that much more you can say. I personally think it's probably the best guitar record I've ever heard. I mean, I'm a massive fan of some of Eric Clapton's stuff. I'm a massive fan of Brothers in Arms by Dire Straits, and I like Led Zeppelin 3 and Led Zeppelin 1, which is Jimmy Page. But I do think that this album by Jimi Hendrix is the best guitar album I've ever heard. Cameron, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. This is an album that there isn't, in some ways, a lot to say about because it's been discussed at great length before. Obviously, it's a fantastic album. It highlights Jimmy's abilities as both a musician with technical ability and as a songwriter. My personal favorite track on the album is The Wind Cries Mary for that reason, because it shows how, even though he's known for his more harder rocking stuff with long solos, he can still compose something that resembles something of a ballad. I personally have never considered this album one of my favorites, even though it's a very good album. I prefer my psychedelia more orchestral, more baroque, slightly more focused on keys. That's for the same reason. The guitar, I think, is very valuable here in this album because he manages to change and subvert your expectations of what you can do with it. You've got these long solos, which, to my knowledge, I don't really think you saw in a lot of music before that. So even though it might not be my cup of tea at every turn, it's still a very good album.
So would you say that you prefer something like Electric Ladyland?
I do, yeah. Electric Ladyland is probably my favorite Hendrix album.
Right.
It, just for the reason that it sort of builds on the more experimental vibes in here. It's got slightly longer solos. I'm thinking tracks like Voodoo Chili and stuff like that. It expands on the experimentation, but as a debut album as well, that's what you've got to remember with this. It's a cracking debut album, and it's a very good record at the time.
Jay, what are your thoughts? Because obviously, I mean, your thoughts on the album overall, and also what Cameron said about he prefers Electric Ladyland, and of course, you told me that you preferred this over Electric Ladyland. So yeah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I actually listened to Electric Ladyland for the first time this week, before listening to Are You Experienced. Obviously, I knew quite a lot of these songs, especially on Are You Experienced. I knew most of the tracks, but I hadn't actually listened to the album as a whole. I thought this was the better album. I actually said that I thought Electric Ladyland was brilliant, but I think this is actually quite significantly better. I think one of the strengths this has got going of it is this has got 17 tracks on it. Every track's like 2-3 minutes, with the exception of Third Flame from the Sun. But they're all kind of fully, fully realized tracks. They're all interesting. They all kind of grab your attention. And then just as you're like, oh my God, this can't get better, it switches into another song and it gets even better. I think also here, I kind of, in a weird way, it's funny because I've always liked the kind of wah-wah, guitar playing from Hendrix, but I actually thought that it was even better here, when obviously they didn't really do that as much, and it kind of felt almost more bluesy at times.
Yeah, that's the thing.
You could kind of, especially here, like, what song was it? It was I Don't Live Today. It kind of, the way he was singing kind of reminded me of like Hoochie Coochie Man, like Muddy Waters in that, where he was kind of singing in between the percussion and between the guitars. Also, actually, on that song as well, like, this guy was using every fucking production technique he could possibly use. Like, it was crazy. I would not have expected this album to be made in the fucking 1960s. It was so, like, the studio techniques are fantastic. The songs are kind of switching up all the time. It's consistently interesting. I think this is a fantastic album.
Arjun, what are your? Oh, sorry, no, Jay. Actually, before I leave you, can you just engage with what Cameron said? So he said he prefers Electric Ladyland to this. What are your thoughts on that comparison?
No, I don't agree. I think Electric Ladyland's brilliant, but I think what this does really well is it kind of takes all the good elements of Electric Ladyland and pushes them in together and kind of condenses it into this slightly shorter but slightly more kind of concise and consistent album. And I think also one of the things I notice a lot is Electric Ladyland for me is a Jimi Hendrix album, whereas I think Are You Experienced is a Jimi Hendrix experience album. Yeah. In the sense that you hear kind of, the drumming, as you said, is on point on this, whereas I think Jimi kind of dominates on Electric Ladyland on songs like All Along the Watchtower. It's just Jimi playing guitar. It's no one else. Whereas here, I think it's nice to see that kind of the other people are allowed to shine in the album as well.
Arjun, what are your thoughts?
In a way, this is quite a bad album to pick because of the fact that it's really hard to critique it because it's such a good album. But yeah, it's a phenomenal album, and coming from a person who doesn't tend to enjoy this sort of music, I loved it when I first listened to it about a year ago, I think. Personally, I haven't actually listened to Electric Ladyland yet, but I actually prefer Axis Boulder's Love to this one. But these two albums, those two albums that I've heard from him are just phenomenal. Yeah, and considering he was 24, 25 when he recorded this, it's just a phenomenal debut.
I mean, he was dead about 3 years later. Age 27.
27. Yeah. But it has such an alluring quality to it that it's so rare because he's just like a great individual musician, and the fact that it was his debut, and it just makes it remarkable to listen to it the first time around and see how young he was when he made this sort of music, because it's genius, to be honest, and it doesn't get old. It's timeless. The fact that it's over half a century later and everyone's still raving about it shows how good it is.
I mean, do you prefer this kind of more bluesy kind of aspects to Hendrix, or the pure kind of famous rocker that most people know?
From what I've heard of him, I certainly prefer Axis Boulder's Love, but it's not a huge thing. I prefer the psychedelic rock that I've heard from him than the more traditional.
I'd agree, I think.
Yeah.
Cameron, so you said also that you kind of prefer a lot of the psychedelic stuff. You kind of agree with Arjun. I mean, I'd probably agree with you, as you know, from my taste like Pink Floyd, etc. What specific psychedelic guitarist albums that do you really enjoy? Just as that you think you enjoy more than this one? Could you give some examples to listeners?
The big one for me is In the Court of the Crimson King by King Crimson. I think that's probably my favorite of the rock psychedelic albums. This might be a bit of heresy, but I do actually prefer that album as a rock psychedelic album to any of Jimi Hendrix's albums.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, purely because, I mean, for the reasons Jay was saying why he likes this album so much, about how it's concise, how the studio is used in such an experimental way. I think In the Court of the Crimson King, you see those ideas built upon in great leaps and strides. You've got more the solos are wackier on the guitar. The percussion, which I'll admit is fantastic on Are You Experienced? The percussion on Crimson King is just that much more that much more experimental. There's just so many more fills there. For all those reasons, I prefer In the Court of Crimson King to any of Hendrix's work, which I realise it's a bit of a hot take.
No, that is a hot take. I mean, so question open to any of you then. So where would you rank Hendrix just in the pantheon of guitarists? I mean, for me, he's probably at the top, followed by Clapton and then Page and then Knopfler and I think everyone else. What are your thoughts?
I prefer Hendrix to Clapton, definitely. I think it's not even that I do slightly prefer like his psychedelic sound, but I also think he's better at the blues guitar. He's better at when he's doing it, completely psychedelic like he does on Electric Ladyland. I think there's a nice, versatility to his playing style. I think it's probably slightly tighter as well. But I think Hendrix is, and I think he also grabs my attention a bit more with his guitar playing.
Yeah, fair enough. Cameron, final word?
Yeah, obviously, as a guitarist from that era, Hendrix is a legend. I personally prefer King Crimson as an album. Guitarists overall, utilising the psychedelic influences, I would have to say that Mark Knopfler is actually my favourite.
Okay, that's fair enough. I mean, Brothers in Arms, I say, is I think it's probably 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10 album, which is Dire Straits.
Yeah, very good. Again, I'm probably more of a Love Over Gold man, I have to say.
Really? Okay.
I do,
no.
yeah.
No, I mean, maybe we'll explore that in a future pod.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, Cameron, then, you may as well go next.
Yeah, so my choice this week was Cool for Cats by Squeeze. It is their second album and was released in 1979. And I chose it because it sort of showed how power pop and new wave were nascent genres at the time, expanding upon your free chord wonder, punk, angry songs. To evolve into something a bit more melodic, a bit more tuneful. And in this album, you can see that, I think, through Jules Holland's work on the keys. You've got quite a range of sounds being used there, from Farfisa organs to Hammond organs to straight-up synthesizers at some point. And also, the lyrics on this album are some of my personal favorite across probably all time of any genre. The partnership of Glenn Tilbrook and Chris Difford, I think, is probably one of the best in the 70s and 80s, maybe getting up close to Ray Davies' level from the Kinks in terms of how they can paint a story from just a mundane slice of life type angle. So yeah, I thought this album's really good, and I'm interested to hear what you guys think about it.
Jay, what are your thoughts? Because I know you liked the title track before you actually listened to the whole thing.
Oh yeah, I first heard the title track when I was probably like 6 or 7 years old in like my dad's car, and it always came on, and I always liked the song. I think it's quite a bit of a banger, and I think it pretty much is. It's kind of the same vibe throughout the whole album. It's kind of a fun listen. It's one of those songs that's just, I guess probably the best term I could use to describe it is bouncy. It's very jolly and fun. I kind of liked it in one of the songs where they start bringing like the bells, and I thought that was kind of interesting. I don't know if I'd necessarily say like the album blew my mind, but it for me kind of stood out as like a really good kind of example of a pop album that's just 12 tracks that are just very pleasurable and fun to listen to. And I think I'm not saying that as a disservice to the album. I thought it was a good album. It might not necessarily be my cup of tea completely, but I thought it was an enjoyable listen.
Arjun?
Yeah, Jay pretty much read my mind there. I was thinking of the way bouncy as well. It's a collection of 12 catchy songs, some of which I liked, some of which I didn't like, but on the whole, it was a very fun listen to. It was a very fun listen, and yeah, it was a fairly solid album, I'd say. But again, it didn't stand out for me as like one of the best albums I've heard for this pod. But I thought it was certainly an enjoyable listen, and just under 40 minutes as well. I never once felt like I was getting bored by the songs.
No, I think I agree with both of you just overall. I enjoyed pretty much 75% of the tracks. I thought were good. The others I thought were like fine. I didn't think that they were bad or anything. I think it was overall a good listen. I never felt bored, as Arjun said. I liked certain songs like Touching Me, Touching You. I thought was quite a good night in a microcosm of the genre. It captured the zeitgeist just in terms of not in terms of like social issues, but in terms of the music and the instrumental and some of the kind of lyricism and pacing and percussive and use of percussive instrumentation. I thought the song "It's Not Cricket" was quite interesting, and I liked the almost kind of authentic UK kind of scene. But yeah, I thought the title track was probably my highlight of the album. I mean, Cameron, what do you think of the individual tracks?
The standout track for me on this album definitely is Up the Junction, and just its ability. It's only 3 minutes long, and it tells this this story with quite a lot of dimensions to it, which I realise might go missed first time round, but that's sort of representative of the whole album for me. It might seem like just a bouncy, fun listen, which obviously I think it is first time round, but then you listen more to the lyrics and just how they capture that quintessentially quirky late 70s, specifically English, irreverent sense of humour. And I think it does have quite a lot of value there then in just how much of a counterpoint to the zeitgeist it actually was. You've got this sort of self-deprecating album with the only real consistent concept being a guy who likes to drink because of his unrequited loves. And you've got that set against this backdrop of massive social change. So yeah, I can see why for some people that might be bouncy or fun in the sense that it is just meaningless in a sense, but it has a more innate value as well for that reason, I think.
So, I mean, where do you think it kind of fits in the genre, or in terms of its era? Because it echoes some of the classic kind of 70s sounds, and but it seems to be almost a precursor to a lot of the later, more boppy 80s synthy stuff as well.
Yeah, so definitely. I mean, some of the tracks on it, especially like the title track, like You Say, is one of your favourites. I think that you could easily mistake that for having been produced by like a Giorgio Moroder in terms of how it utilises the synthesizers, or the introductory track, Slap and Tickle. It does. That's sort of what I was alluding to why I chose it. It's the evolution of punk music and that sort of power pop, mid-70s stuff into then your 1980s new wave stuff, going from more simplistic songwriting into using more experimental instrumentals, and also exploring slightly more complex, in-depth lyrical themes. So it does. It's a nice middle point between those two genres.
And if someone like kind of quite enjoyed listening to this and they'd want to like move on to something similar, what other albums would you recommend?
I'd recommend the band Sparks, specifically their albums. I think it's called My Kimono or Touching My Kimono or something. And the other one, and my personal favourite, is Number One in Heaven.
Kimono My House.
That's the one, yeah. Kimono My House. 1974, I think it was. If I remember correctly.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah, and because they're another band that sort of went from glam rock into more explicitly new wave, going from heavily featured guitars into bringing in synthesizers and then mediating those. So very comparable.
Okay, let's move on then to Arjun's choice, and he's chosen an album by The Roots. Arjun, you just wanted to talk briefly about the artist before you tell us about the album?
Yeah, so The Roots, you may know, are the backing band, the instrumental band, the house band that are on the Jimmy Fallon show, the Tonight Show, Jimmy Fallon. So it may seem a bit bizarre to newcomers to them that they actually have one of among the more stellar discographies in hip hop. They're a very commendable hip hop group by their own right. They're more a duo, I would say. So they have two constant members, Black Thought and Questlove, who are the vocalist and the drummer respectively. And then they have a sort of revolving door of musicians, like percussionists, players, bass players, human beatboxers, guitarists that come and go, and I've been through a revolving door for the last almost 3 decades, and they've released 14 albums to date, and all of them are very stellar. At least the ones that I've heard, I think I've heard about 11 of them. Very stellar, very solid albums. Their first album, Organics, was a sort of a classic jazz rap album, a very humble beginning to their career. they just seem to be some sort of a jazz band that had fun, a bit of vocals here and there, but it's more a jazz album than an actual hip hop album. But with this third album, Illadelph Halflife, they really come into their own and really kick into the roots, if you pardon the pun, that we know them, that many people know them to be today. And this was a very enjoyable album. This was one of the first albums I heard from them, and it was a very solid album, and I'd be interested to hear what you guys thought of it.
Yeah, I mean, before I'd started, I was really intrigued just because obviously I'd watched Jimmy Fallon for years and I'd seen them on, and I'd seen at Tariq or Black Thought and Questlove were obviously very talented musicians. So I was kind of interested to hear some of their studio album stuff. And also you'd sent me before I listened some of Tariq doing 10-minute freestyle, which obviously caught the internet by storm when it happened. So that just kind of further piqued my curiosity. Overall, I thought I really kind of enjoyed the album. I liked the kind of classic hip hop production. It reminded me a lot of other mid-90s rap, and it reminded me a lot with the kind of flows about almost kind of precursor to more conscious stuff rather than almost braggadocious stuff, which I guess plays into Black Thought's kind of whole persona as someone who is more conscious about kind of social issues rather than merely just kind of bragging about his own personal wealth and stuff. I mean, what did you think, Jay, as someone who's kind of more getting into hip hop as you go along?
I really liked this actually. It was definitely my favorite album Arjun's recommended. I thought it was a really interesting listen. We were kind of saying about how, a sign of a good album is when it's quite long, but it never gets boring and you don't even kind of notice the time pass. And I definitely would echo that here. I mean, the album's 80 minutes, there's 20 tracks, but at no point did I feel like I was just listening to the same song. In particular, I felt there was a really good use of kind of these intermissions, such as versus scratch with like the DJ sets kind of playing in the background, or Dave versus US, which kind of helps keep your attention. One of the things I thought was fantastic about this album actually was the transitions between each track. It was pretty much seamless. I loved the kind of constant jazz influence that was, permeating throughout the entire album, and also the fact that they decided to end it on kind of a spoken word outro. I thought this was a really good album. I thought it was interesting. It was probably one of the better rap albums I've listened to, especially from this era. I really liked it.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Cameron, what are your thoughts?
This was a good hip hop album. The standout for me on this project was the lyrics. I really enjoyed how introspective they were and how cognizant of the times they were. A lot of people I think might consider this album dated now. It's 25 years old and it has references to these things that were just, it's a very 90s album. They're talking about the Atlanta Olympics and cell phones just coming in and sort of drawing analogies from that with, the tribulations of the black community in America at the time. But I don't think it's dated. I think it's more of it's a valuable snapshot into the cultural attitudes of the time. And I really did that. I enjoyed the lyrics for this is what sold it for me. Obviously, the production is very good as well. Like Jay said, there's an obvious jazz influence. I also like the inclusion of artists like D'Angelo on certain points of this to give it that R&B slow jam type vibe. It actually reminded me more of some 70s soul in bits more than explicit jazz. I got a big Luther Vandross type vibe from a lot of the tracks. But no, this was a really tight record and probably, like Jay said, for me as well, the favourite one that Arjun's recommended. So yeah, this is probably an 8 out of 10 for me. I really enjoyed this one.
No, I think I agree. I mean, it's either this one or Sean Price is probably my favourite, but it is probably this because I really do like the East Coast 90s vibe. As I've said on previous pods, I'm trying to get into it more by listening to stuff from the Wu-Tang. And obviously I like Nas in Illmatic because obviously I think a masterpiece, probably the best hip hop album I've listened to. So I definitely heard those kind of influences or comparable kind of styles in this album. I liked some of the kind of almost sampling based songs because of the use of the instrumentals, because the group's quite large, so they have like beatboxers and bass players, etc. So they can add kind of instrumentation to songs which almost sound like samples, which act as a kind of precursor to people that you'd hear now, someone like J. Cole or someone who is quite orchestral and grandiose in their production, but willing to use, variety of instruments, orchestral sounds, but then combining that with almost the grittier content-based or grittier kind of live content-based 90s East Coast rap that characterizes a lot of the best rap that I've heard. I mean, Arjun, how would you position this in the kind of hip hop you've listened to and in terms of eras?
Yeah, I thought it was the albums in general really solid marrying of live instrumentation and the boom bap that everyone likes from the sort of 90s when they think of 90s hip hop. But yeah, if I personally love artists like Gangstar, Tribe Called Quest, Digable Planets, even more conscious rappers like Common, Talib Kweli, Mos Def, and yeah, this is one of the standout albums of the sort of jazz rap and conscious rap and boom bap genre, and it brings together all three subgenres really well. And what I like about the Roots is that all of their albums seem to represent different subgenres of hip hop. So you have the explicit jazz rap of their first album, Organics. Then you have the extremely experimental, almost electronic Game Theory, and then they have an album exclusively of covers as well, How I Got Over, which was released I think in 2010. And they're a really unique band in that they adapt really well to the period that they make their albums in. All of their albums sound fresh. They don't really sound too dated, and even up to their most recent album as well. So yeah, a really solid hip hop group that I would recommend listening to more albums from.
Yeah, fair enough. So I mean, yeah, those are the kind of 4 albums that we reviewed. I think personally, I'd say that I like the Roots one. I think Hendrix is obviously probably the best album, but I guess that's kind of uncontroversial. I like the Roots, probably put them, and then I'd probably put Bjork. I guess you guys like Bjork more than I do. I'm not sure. I mean, how would you guys kind of rank the albums based on what you've heard? Cameron?
Sorry, you want about Bjork albums or the albums we listened to?
No, the albums we listened to.
All right, no worries. Yeah. Well, I'm going to go for a bit of a hot take here, just because it's very personal preference, but yeah. I did like the Squeeze album the best.
Really? Okay.
I hate to say it, my opinions will not change that much. I'd probably go Squeeze, then Bjork, then Jimi Hendrix, and then the Roots.
Interesting.
All the albums were very good this week, I'll have to say.
Yeah, they were actually. We had no Kevin Federline, I'll say that.
Yeah.
Jay, what are your thoughts on how the albums kind of rank?
That's hard, actually. I'd say the top is a bit of a toss between Hendrix and Bjork. I think the best tracks on Homogenic are probably better than the best tracks on Are You Experienced? But I'd say overall, Are You Experienced is probably the most consistent album we had. That being said, I really liked Illadelph, Halflife. I also enjoyed Call for Cats. Again, I kind of do echo that there's no weak album. I did definitely think while I was listening to this, I think we'd probably made our best choices this week. Yeah, I thought we did quite good actually in picking some albums. I thought they were interesting. There was no album that was kind of, I was like, why did someone pick this?
Arjun.
I mean, yeah, firstly, none of these albums come close to Kevin Federline, which was just the superior album we've listened to doing the podcast. I think objectively, Our Experience is the best album out of the 4. But from personal preference in terms of enjoyment, I enjoy listening to Illadelph Halflife the most. But I would rank that second. But first, in terms of pure enjoyment, I like the Bjork album. That would probably come third. And the Squeeze album, again, was enjoyable, but for me, out of the 4 was the weakest.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
So what we've learned is we're all stuck in our ways.
Yeah, pretty much. So what are you guys up to listening to then this week then? Cameron?
So I'm probably going to listen to an album more out of a sense of obligation than actually wanting to, and that is the new 1975 album, Notes on a Conditional Form. I've not yet listened to it. I just have to say that I despise the 1975. I hate everything they stand for musically and otherwise. I just detest them. But I do realise that's a bit of an untenable position if I don't listen to their new album, which I'm not looking forward to. I thought their last one before that, Brief Inquiry into Online Relationships, was one of the most bloated, self-indulgent pieces of disposable garbage released in the last decade, I can't really put into words just how much I hated that album.
Tell us how you really feel.
I'm not pulling any punches here. But I'll give it a listen. I go into it with an open mind, and I might end up enjoying it, but I'm not holding my breath.
That assessment, although I've not listened to that penultimate 1975 record you mentioned there, that does remind me of how I felt about the latest Arctic Monkeys record, which was 4 out of 5.
I like that album.
I thought it was a bit indulgent. I didn't think that Alex Turner's vocals were sustainable throughout the.
I do see why you say that. I think that
I didn't mind that album.
I liked it. I appreciated how they switched it up after AM. I thought they needed to go in a new place, and I think they did that decently enough. But I can see what you're saying about his vocals. It didn't really, for like, it was quite a long album for that length. I'm not sure.
Arjun, what are you up to then this week, musically?
Yeah, I'm not sure, to be honest. I'll probably just listen to some albums spontaneously. I'll probably listen back to The Roots and the albums that I listen to those again, and perhaps listen to one of them most recent ones, just because I'm sort of on a roll with them right now. So,
Fair enough. And what about you, Jay?
I'd probably listen to some more of. I listened to Mad Villainy, as we said, and NoF Doom. I'll probably check out some more of their stuff. I am quite spontaneous. I'll just listen to whatever I feel like.
Jay, you need to listen to Illmatic.
I listened to it yesterday.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah, that's what my message was meant to convey. We didn't obviously get the hint.
No.
Yeah, we can discuss that next week then, I guess. Also, we're going on the assumption that is Kanye West's new album coming out this week. Technically, it's meant to on Friday.
I mean, do we actually think that's going to happen?
No, of course not.
He's got previous and letting us all down, so.
On Radio Music, it says it's coming out,
But I mean, like, and also like, I mean, he's gonna okay. What's gonna happen is that the tracks, because he released a track list on Twitter for those who don't know, and it had some tracks that had asterisks next to them. And one thing that's gonna happen is, so this album won't come out this week. We'll have an album next year called like The Lord Is My Shepherd or something like that, and like all the asterisk tracks will be on there. So about half the tracks, and they'll all be edited to be shorter, and they'll all be like worse than they were before. That's kind of what I'm expecting of Kanye now. I mean, Arjun, what do you think is going to happen with Kanye?
In terms of the album, well, I have no clue, to be honest. He probably won't ever mention that tweet again. He won't acknowledge it. Who knows? I really can't read into this man's mind, to be honest. All I know is that whatever he does, it'll be a crazy ride. It'll be enjoyable. It'll be cringy. It'll be entertaining to watch. It'll be sad to watch. And yeah, enjoy the roller coaster of being a fan of his.
Well, I guess on that quite poignant note and very accurate note, we'll leave it here. Thank you guys for your time. We'll be back next time with another 4 albums. We hope to keep it, quite varied in genre, and yeah, we hope that we're doing that. I think we have done that successfully so far. And yeah, we'll see you next time on Waxing Lyrical from the Symposium. Just a quick reminder that we're on Spotify. You can find the link in our Instagram bio, the Symposium podcast, and then all our other links will be there too, to our YouTube channel and our Instagram, etc. So yeah, please do follow us on Spotify and enjoy our content. Thanks. See you next time.
The Symposium with Ash Aulak.